Welcome back, friends. OldDadGuy here. Tonight's story takes us to Salem, Massachusetts, where one family checked into a quaint little inn with a big problem. The walls still remember the trials, and the staff never really left. This one's called The Widow's Veil. Grab a cider or something stronger and settle in. Enjoy. The Cotter family rolled into Salem the way most tourists do, late, tired, and already irritated with each other. The drive from Pennsylvania had been long enough that the inside of the SUV smelled like a mixture of fast food wrappers, pumpkin spice lattes, and something Max had spilled 2 states back but wouldn't admit to. Rick Cotter, hands gripping the wheel, muttered about traffic lights that seemed designed to torture him personally. I swear, this town puts a stop sign every 10 feet just to see how long it takes out of towners to crack. He had the voice of a man who thought he was funny, though his family's silence said otherwise. Dana, riding shotgun, was busy with her phone, scrolling through an article titled 10 Real Sights from the Salem Witch Trials. She was a history teacher, the type who cried at battlefields and whispered respectfully in cemeteries. For her, Salem wasn't just a vacation, it was a pilgrimage. This is it, she said with quiet reverence. We're here at last. In the back seat, Julie let out a groan loud enough to compete with the engine. 16 years old, dressed in black leggings and a hoodie that read, Dramatics Club Forever. She'd spent most of the trip practicing expressions of theatrical disdain. It looks like every other tourist town, she said flatly, peering out at the strings of orange lights and plastic skeletons that clung to storefronts, only with more pointy hats. Beside her, Max grinned wide, shuffling a battered deck of magician's cards. At 12, he was convinced he had the gift, though most of his tricks ended with someone's drink spilling. I'm going to go do a seance tonight, he announced proudly. Bet I get more ghosts than Ethan did last year. Julie rolled her eyes so hard it was a wonder they didn't roll out the window. You're not summoning anything except Dad's temper. Rick cleared his throat. Kids got ambition. World needs more magicians. Less TikTok dancers. More card shufflers. Less complaining drivers would be nice too, Dana added sweetly, which earned her a glare from Rick. They turned down a narrow cobblestone street that looked like it had been designed when horses were still considered cutting-edge transportation. Tourists in witch hats had ambled by, cider cups in hand. Signs for tarot readers and ghost tours crowded the sidewalks. A man in a tricorn hat waved as they passed. There it is, Dana said, pointing. At the end of the lane stood a house, or maybe an inn, or maybe a relic that couldn't decide what it wanted to be. The Widow's Veil. The name was painted in black script across a sagging wooden sign. A lace veil fluttering from the corner as though some unseen hand had tied it there. The house itself was 3 stories tall, narrow and leaning like it was exhausted from holding itself upright for centuries. Candles glowed faintly in the windows, though no electricity seemed to hum behind them. Well, Rick said, pulling in the gravel lot, looks like a fixer-upper. Guess we're sleeping in a Scooby-Doo episode. Dana shot him a look. It's authentic. It's drafty, Julie muttered. Max pressed his face to the glass, grinning. It's perfect. The front door creaked open before they reached it, as if the house had been listening for them. An elderly woman in a black dress appeared, her hair pinned back, her face pale as porcelain. She smiled, though it was the kind of smile that made you wonder if she practiced it in front of a mirror. Welcome, she said, her voice soft and careful. I am Miss Alcott, keeper of the Widow's Veil. You must be the Cotters. Dana stepped forward, eager. Yes, thank you for having us. The photos were wonderful, but this is even better. Rick leaned close to her ear. Wonderful is one word for it. Miss Alcott's eyes lingered on each of them in turn. Rick, Dana, Julie, Max, like she was memorizing their faces. You should know, she added after a pause, on All Hallows Eve, the widow is restless. It is best not to wander after sundown. Some shows are not meant for visitors. Julie smirked. Spooky warning. Classic. Max whispered. Odd. She's like a real NPC. Rick forced a chuckle, though the hair on the back of his neck bristled. Great. Local color. Let's just hope breakfast isn't cursed. The family followed Mrs. Alcott inside, the door closing behind them with a sigh, as if the widow's veil had just taken a deep breath. Morning in Salem felt like stepping into a postcard that had been dipped in pumpkin spice. The streets glowed orange from strings of jack-o'-lantern lights draped across every lamppost. Shopkeepers hauled racks of witch hats and cloaks onto the sidewalks, shouting greetings in accents that may or may not have been authentic. The air was sharp with wood smoke and cider. Dana Cotter looked like she was walking on sacred ground. She stopped at every plaque, every marker, every store that claimed genuine witch trial relics inside. She pressed her palms together in reverence, whispering little factoids to the kids. This is where Bridget Bishop lived before her trial, and over here, this was the meeting house where the first accusations were read. Julie trailed behind, earbuds dangling without music, wearing her permanent mask of teenage disinterest. Cool. More dead Puritans. Can we go get Starbucks now? Starbucks is a sin in Salem, Rick said, deadpan, sipping from a paper cup that very clearly had the Starbucks logo. Max skipped along the cobblestones, clutching his magician's deck in one hand and a cheap wand he'd already conned Dana into buying in the other. I'm gonna find a real witch, he declared. One that teaches spells. And Julie's gonna regret making fun of me. Julie rolled her eyes so hard, Dana worried she might sprain an optic nerve. They passed street performers dressed in black cloaks, chanting mock incantations. Tour guides in tricorn hats shouted above the gallows. Vendors handed out samples of pumpkin brittle. At one corner, a man in a powdered wig and stocks posed for selfies, calling himself the last guilty man. The Cotters couldn't walk 10 feet without being offered a ghost tour, a tarot reading, or a chance to buy genuine cursed dirt from Gallows Hill. Rick bought a bag of the cursed dirt just so he could sprinkle it on the SUV later and tell Dana it was acting up. But beneath the carnival atmosphere, there was something harder to ignore. Whenever Dana mentioned where they were staying, conversations froze. A tour guide's face fell when she said, "We're at the Widow's Veil." He muttered, "That house ain't on the map," and quickly shuffled his group down an alley. A barista at a corner coffee shop gave her a to-go cup with a sticky note on the lid. It read, "Leave before dark." Dana frowned. Maybe it's just marketing. Create mystery, sell tickets. Rick smirked. Great. We're part of a haunted house marketing campaign. Do we get royalties? Jolie shrugged. Maybe they just hate tourists. I can relate. Max clutched the note with wide eyes. This is a clue. It's like real-life Scooby-Doo. That afternoon, Dana dragged them all to the Salem Witch Trial Memorial. The stone benches carved with the victims' names stretched under a gray sky. Tourists snapped pictures, whispering. Dana read the inscription softly, tracing her fingers over the letters. Julie pretended to be bored, but caught herself staring at one name, Amputator. For just a second, she swore she heard whispering, faint as a breath against her ear. When she turned, no one was there. At Gallows Hill Park, Max darted ahead with his wand, announcing he was going to summon the spirits. He waved his arms dramatically, muttering nonsense spells. To everyone's shock, a cold wind tore across the hill, rattling the trees. Rick laughed nervously. Good trick, kid. Keep that up and you'll get us kicked out of Massachusetts. Jolie whispered, That wasn't him. Dana hushed them, her face pale. It's just the weather. But even she didn't sound convinced. As dusk bled into the crooked streets, Salem became something different. Costumes filled the sidewalks, witches, skeletons, vampires mingling with tourists. The glow of lanterns painted every brick wall gold. Somewhere down the block, a drum line pounded in rhythm, leading the Halloween parade. The Cotters wove through the crowd, their laughter quieter now. The town's cheer was still there, but behind it, a weight pressed in. Shadows stretched too long. The widow's veil, when they returned, loomed like it had been waiting for them all day. Its lace veil fluttered in the night breeze, though no wind touched the street. Miss Alcott greeted them at the door, her smile fixed. Her pale hands folded neatly. I trust you enjoyed the day, she said. Rick gave a half shrug. Sure. Learned about ghosts, bought some dirt, ate funnel cake. Classic vacation. Miss Alcott's eyes lingered on Julie, then on Max. Tonight, she said softly, the widow is restless. The veil will perform its rites. Julie blinked. What does that mean? The old woman didn't answer. She simply turned, beckoning them inside. The door closed behind them with a finality that made Rick mutter, Well, that's comforting, under his breath. The dining hall of the Widow's Vale looked like it had been pulled straight from a wax museum. Long wooden tables stretched beneath low beams, every surface crowded with flickering candles that dripped wax onto silver trays. The walls were hung with black lace curtains, old portraits peering down from their frames, faces half faded, eyes still sharp. A gramophone in the corner played a scratchy waltz that seemed to loop endlessly. The same notes circling until Rick muttered, If I hear that violin one more time, I'm feeding the record to the fireplace. Other guests had gathered, 5 or 6 couples, all tourists, judging by their cameras and sneakers. They chatted nervously, sipping mulled wine from chipped goblets. The air smelled of cinnamon and smoke, though underneath lingered something sour, like damp earth. Miss Alcott moved between the tables in silence, pouring wine, her pale hands steady. When everyone was seated, she stepped to the head of the hall. On this night, she said, her voice carrying far too easy in the low room, we honor the widow, she who waits beyond the veil. We will show you our history. Some call it theater, some call it superstition. Call it what you will, but do not turn away. Max sat up straighter, eyes wide. It's a play, he whispered to Dana. We're in a show. Rick smirked. Dinner and theater, huh? Hope they validate parking. The candles dimmed as if someone had drawn breath through the room. The lace curtains swayed, though no breeze touched them. From a side door came figures in cloaks, 6 of them, faces hidden in the black hoods. They moved with a rhythm too fluid to be simple actors. voices rising in chant that rolled like thunder. Ashes for the widow, shadows for the child. Ashes for the widow, shadows for the child. Julie felt her stomach twist. This doesn't feel like acting, she muttered. The play grew darker. One cloaked figure stepped forward, holding a noose. Another carried a rusted iron scale. They circled the tables, murmuring words in a language no one quite caught. The tourists laughed nervously, clapping as if unsure whether to applaud or to run. Dana leaned forward, whispering to Rick, "This isn't in any of the brochures." Then one of the hooded figures stopped beside Julie. Slowly, deliberately, he reached for her hoodie's hood and tugged it back. His head tilted. From beneath the black fabric, a low rasp slipped. "Daughter?" Julie froze. "Excuse me?" The figure lifted a pale hand and pressed it against her cheek. Cold as ice, trembling like brittle bone. The other cloaks turned toward her, their chant shifting. "She returns. The widow's child. She returns." Max half stood, excited. They think she's part of the play. But Julie's chest tightened. She looked at Dana, whose face had gone white. "Mom, this isn't a play." The candles flared, then guttered. The tourists stopped laughing. The portraits on the walls seemed to lean forward, eyes widening. The room itself felt like it had grown teeth. Rick, ever the skeptic, tried to laugh it all off. "All right, great show, folks. You really sold it. But maybe let the kid eat her dinner before you sacrifice her, okay?" Miss Alcott's voice cut through the room like glass. "Do not mock the right." The floorboards shuddered. The gramophone shrieked before grinding to a halt. And in the corner, shadows thickened, pulling together into the shape of a woman draped in black lace. Her face was veiled, but behind the mesh, something glowed. A hollow brightness where eyes should be. The widow. Julie felt her throat close. The cloaked figures reached her arms, murmuring, "The daughter. The daughter returns." Dana surged up from her chair. "She's not your daughter. She's mine." The widow turned, her voice a low, fractured whisper that seemed to come from the walls themselves. "Blood remembers blood. The role must be filled." Julie whimpered, jerking back as the noose was lifted over her head. The line between theater and nightmare had vanished. Rick gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles white. For once, he had no joke ready. "Oh, hell," he muttered. "This isn't dinner theater at all." The dining hall dissolved. One moment, Julie was staring at a noose. The next, the walls themselves stretched upward like stage curtains. Candles grew taller, their flames bending into twisted chandeliers. Tables melded into pews. The portraits groaned as their figures stepped free, silent jurors with sunken eyes, taking their seats in a courtroom that had not existed a heartbeat ago. Julie stumbled backward, her hoodie snagging in invisible hands. The cloaked figures drove her toward the center of the room, where a wooden platform rose from nothing, complete with gallows beam and rope swaying in air that wasn't moving. "This isn't real," she whispered, though her knees buckled. "This isn't real." "It's theater," Max cried, though his voice cracked. His wand shook in his fist. "It's just theater." Rick grabbed his son's shoulder, forcing him down. "Kid, if this is a show, then Broadway needs to call these people, because the special effects budget is insane." Dana pushed past them, eyes blazing. "Stop this. She's not part of your play. The widow glided forward. Lace brushed the floor, a trail of shadow spilling behind her. Her voice scraped against the air. Every tale needs its players. Every stage needs its sacrifice. The daughter returns. The rite continues. The jury of ghosts pounded the pews with skeletal fists. Guilty. Guilty. Miss Alcott appeared at the head of the court, standing behind a judge's pulpit that hadn't been there before. Her face was the same mask of pale serenity. The widow calls her child. Judgment falls tonight, as it has for centuries. Julie screamed as the noose slid over her shoulders, scratchy rope biting her skin. Dana lunged, shoving the cloaked figure away. Over my dead body. The figure stumbled, but didn't fall. Its hood slipped back, and for an instant, Dana saw nothing beneath it but hollow space. A cavern of black with a faint whisper of lips forming. Yes. The air thundered with chanting. The cloaked six swayed in rhythm. The walls pressed inward. Rick, shaking despite his best efforts at bravado, muttered, "If this ghost trial ends with jury duty, I'm suing Expedia." Max started forward, standing in front of Julie with his cards fanned out in trembling hands. "You want a performance? Then watch this." He flicked the cards into the air. They spun, scattering like birds. For one impossible second, the cards burned with light, glowing symbols crawling across their surfaces. The chanting faltered. One of the ghosts tilted its head. Rick blinked. Well, hell. Guess the kid really does have a gift. The widow hissed, a sound like glass snapping. Tricks do not fool the veil. She raised a hand, and the cards fell, smoking into ashes at Max's feet. Julie sobbed, jerking against the rope. "Please, I'm not her. I don't even look like her." "You wear her face," the widow whispered. "You speak her tongue. Blood remembers." Dana stepped forward, voice shaking but fierce. "No, you don't get to write her story. You don't get to drag us into your nightmare." The courtroom trembled. The jury leaned forward, hollow eyes glowing. Miss Alcott's voice boomed. "The family stands accused. Will they confess? Will they yield?" Rick straightened, putting one arm around Dana, the other around his kids. His throat was tight, but his words came out steady. "We're not confessing to anything. We came here for cider and bad souvenirs, not your Salem live-action horror RPG. You picked the wrong family." The widow froze. For the first time, she seemed unsure. The jury murmured, the chant breaking. Dana pressed the moment. "Your whole story is built on lies. Salem wasn't justice. It was fear, hysteria. You were killers, not saviors. We're not playing along." The floor cracked like ice underfoot. The shadows hissed. The noose slipped from Julie's shoulders, falling limp. The widow shrieked, lace flaring out like wings. "Silence! The right cannot break." But it was breaking. The widow's shriek shook the rafters, her voice like nails raked across stone. The courtroom of shadows quivered, walls bowing inward as if the house itself would collapse. The jury of specters slammed their fists on the benches, bellowing, "Confess! Confess! Confess!" Julie stumbled forward, the noose dangling at her feet. Her face was pale, but her eyes burned with something new. Anger. "I'm not your daughter," she shouted, her voice breaking the rhythm of the chant. "I'm me, Julie Cotter. I don't belong to you. The ghosts froze. Just for a moment. The chant faltered, syllables trailing into silence. The widow turned, her veiled face tilting. Blood denies blood? Yes, Julie said, louder now. You had your victims. I'm not one of them, and I won't play your part. She yanked the rope from her shoulders and threw it onto the floor, the sound of it hitting the wood echoing like a gunshot. Max shoved his way beside her, gripping his wand like it was a sword. And I'm not scared of you. You're just a story. And stories, he flicked his wrist, producing a card from thin air. His trick actually working this time. The card spun, glowing faintly as it landed at the widow's feet. Can change. Rick barked out a laugh, though his voice shook. God, I love this kid. Remind me to raise his allowance if we live. Dana stepped up last, her voice steady, teacher strong. I spent my life telling the truth about Salem, the hysteria, the lies. You're not justice. Widow, you're a lie that kept going too long. It ends tonight. The court cracked. Ghosts leaned back, uncertain, their eyes dimming. The benches splintered. The chandeliers swung violently, wax raining down like blood. The widow shrieked again, reaching out a hand, shadows writhing from her fingertips. You cannot unwrite the script. The play is eternal. But Julie was already tearing the journal from her pocket, the one she'd found earlier, left on a shelf in the inn's lobby. She opened it and read aloud the names scrawled inside. Every victim, every child, every woman condemned. Her voice wavered, but the names carried like bells through the hall. Anne Pudiator, Sarah Good, Martha Carrier, Bridget Bishop. The names rolled on. With each one spoken, the shadows recoiled, hissing. The jury clutched their ears. Rick added his own voice, shouting over the noise. You want a confession? Fine, I confess. I shouldn't have booked a creepy inn in Salem off the internet. But that's all you're getting. Max cackled, joining in. I confess you're bad at being scary. Dana raised her voice above them all. The truth is enough. The victims are remembered. The lies stop here. The widow screamed, her lace veil ripping like smoke. Her form flickered, unraveling. The shadows broke apart into ash, dissolving into the air. The gallows splintered and fell. The jury faded one by one, leaving only the echo of silence. The widow's final whisper slithered through the room as she collapsed into nothing. Without me, the tale dies. Without me, Salem forgets. Then she was gone. The courtroom crumbled back into the dining hall. The tables stood again, though empty. Their candles burned to stubs. Miss Alcott's chair at the head of the room was vacant, her pale form nowhere in sight. The gramophone was silent. The Cotters stood in the center, gasping, trembling, but whole. Julie dropped the journal. I think we won? Rick clutched her shoulder. Kiddo, if that was winning, I'd hate to see losing. Max, wide-eyed, held up his wand. Did you see me? I made real magic. Dana pulled them all into her arms, voice thick. You saved us. All of you. We did it together. For the first time in hours, there was only silence. Real silence. Morning came to Salem like a sigh after a nightmare. The Cotters woke slumped at the dining table of the widow's veil, stiff and aching. Their clothes smelling faintly of smoke, though the fireplace was cold. For a long moment, none of them spoke. The house was too quiet. as if it were holding its breath. Rick rubbed his eyes, wincing. Tell me we didn't actually just survive a community theater production from hell. Dana gave him a look, though even she couldn't muster her usual scolding. It wasn't theater, Rick. It was. It was something else. She touched Julie's arm gently, searching her face. Are you all right? Julie pulled her hoodie tighter, shivering. I don't know. I don't feel like myself. But I'm not her either. I'm me. I think that matters. Max yawned so wide his jaw cracked, then grinned as if they hadn't nearly died. I still say I saved the day. Did you see the card trick? That was magic. Real magic. I told you. Rick ruffled his son's hair. Fine. You win. World's youngest stage magician defeats a centuries-old nightmare. Put that on your college application. They gathered their bags quickly. The house felt wrong in the daylight, emptier than it had any right to be. No innkeeper. No other guests. No sound of footsteps on the stairs. The portraits hung flat against the walls again, their painted eyes dull, lifeless. As they stepped onto the street, the door closed behind them on its own. Just a simple click, like the inn was done with them. Outside, Salem bustled as though nothing had happened. The Halloween parade carried on. Vendors shouted about cider and kettle corn. Tourists and witch hats laughed, taking selfies against brick walls that had soaked in centuries of blood and fear. Julie blinked into the sun, disoriented. How can they all just go on like normal? Dana squeezed her hand. Maybe they don't know. Maybe no one ever does. Rick adjusted his bag on his shoulder, glaring at the inn behind them. Next year, Marriott? I want a continental breakfast and 0 ghost trials. Max raised his wand like a trophy. And I want more cards. Real ones this time. I'm leveling up. Julie laughed, though it came out cracked, tired. You're such a dork. They walked toward the court, swallowed by Salem's festivities, the widow's veil shrinking behind them until it was just another crooked shadow among many. And although none of them spoke about it, all 4 felt the same thing. The story wasn't finished. Salem remembered, and somewhere, beneath lace and ash, the widow was waiting for another stage, another audience, another family foolish enough to step inside her inn. And that, friends, was The Widow's Veil. I hope you enjoyed it. I wanted to do something a little bit different this go-round and add a little bit more old dad guy, well, dad humor. Anywho, if you liked tonight's tale, drop a comment, share it with someone who wouldn't last 5 minutes in a haunted inn, and don't forget to subscribe for more haunted Halloween stories. Until next time, stay spooky, and maybe skip the reenactments. What is a ghost's favorite dessert? I scream. Meh. Oh, dad guy. You thought you were alone, didn't you? But they've been watching the whole time. Like, subscribe, and maybe they'll let you sleep tonight.